Welcome to third episode of CyberCast. Today's episode is going to address, I wouldn't say a huge controversial topic, but something that is not discussed extremely frequently, B2B branding. Since most B2B brands are not extremely focused on branding or traditional marketing, so that is exactly what we're going to discuss today. Hi Lawrence, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you very much.
Just a quick intro. Our guest today is Lawrence. He's a marketing specialist at WPBakery. I am pretty sure everybody knows what that is. But before we go on, Lawrence would like to introduce yourself to our viewers.
So I've been working in digital for quite some time. I actually started like in 1988, and my career has really been um split in two. So I was building and managing websites first, and then I pivoted towards the marketing role, and eventually I started working for a couple of WordPress hosting providers, and that really formed me as a product marketer. Um, Before starting work, I actually studied architecture, so nothing to do with technology, nothing to do with IT, because that was the early days of the internet. It was all very exciting, and I was playing around trying to build web pages, and I decided that I didn't want to become an architect, so I eventually became, I suppose, a digital professional.
Okay. Uh, Before we start, move on to the topic. Would you like to talk a little bit about your role at WP Bakery and what decisions, what life events led you to where you are today? Since you said you started with architecture.
Yeah, so I'm a marketing specialist at WPBakery. There are three of us. It's a quite flat team. It's a quite small team, and I actually just joined in December, so I'm relatively new. But like many people, I knew the brand, and I was actually pretty excited about joining um, WP Bakery because as a brand, it's kind of perceived as a legacy product. You know, you've got all these other new page builders. You've got the block editor, which is the new shiny thing. Um, and there's still like millions of people using WP Bakery every day. So obviously, there's a ton of people that like it. So one of the things that we need to do is really to change this perception of WP Bakery. From all the negative things that people tend to read about and hear about to actually what the real value of the product is. And that's like a interesting marketing challenge. And typically throughout my career, I've tried to sort of go work where there was some kind of challenge. Even previously working for hosting providers, um, I worked for one called Conversia, which was one of the first platforms that truly scalable for WordPress. So that was like back in 2019, and again that was quite an interesting exercise because it was new. There was no real scalable WordPress hosting category, and there are opportunities when that's the case, but also a lot of challenges. That I like I like roles where which have a little bit of a challenge. I'm always tend to try and approach things um, from a different angle. I think also I also like to, given my age and my experience, to like hook onto some of the older even academic principles in marketing and even in life as well.
Okay. Thank you for your answer. Since you said that, your main role at this point is to, transform what people think about WP Bakery currently, right? So, do you think it's different than marketing for a product that's just starting out? So you can build the perspective that you want to build. But since you're trying to change it, do you think it's more challenging?
It is more challenging because once you established a brand, changing the perception is really hard.
Not easy. Yeah.
People form ideas about a brand, and if it's an older brand, then over the years, these ideas have been reinforced. Obviously, the challenges for a startup is that nobody knows you, so nobody understands what you do, what you stand for, what your position is in the market, and you have to shape that. I mean, there is also a third thing which is really hard is doing a rebrand, like changing a name,
Refresh.
changing the visual language, and that's really never a good idea because you've invested so much to build this brand, and now you want to change it. I mean, there might be good reasons. There are, you know, it is done, and often for good reasons. But if you could avoid rebranding, try to, and that's not, that doesn't mean to do a refresh of the brand. So that's a different thing altogether.
Okay. Okay. So moving on to our actual questions. What do you think are some of the fundamentals of branding over the years? Do you think that changed it or it's like the same? But what is the ideal starting point?
Yeah, look, I mean, the fundamentals have been the same for the past 30, 40, 50 years, right? Um, I think what has changed are the channels, the markets have changed, the medium has changed, obviously digital, and now we have AI, which is like changing everything else. But the fundamentals remain there and are as strong as ever. Actually, like in 1957, I think Kit Kat came up with the tagline, "Have a break, have a Kit Kat." Right, so they had the advertising campaign. They probably won some prizes at Cannes or whatever, and it was really really successful. And they stuck to that, right? So even now, um, it's such a strong position. It's such a strong tagline that everyone knows. Remember that it's madness to change. And in B2B and particularly B2B tech, there's less of that. So brand is not as much a preoccupation for marketers as it should be. Should be, I think. But I think also things are starting to change now because it's so noisy out there. Everyone can do everything at scale, right? So how do you differentiate yourself? How do you stand out, amongst all this noise? And brand is important for that.
Yeah, and I think even Alibaba is a good example of that. I mean, almost a decade ago, nobody knew they were a B2B brand, and now it's a household name. Yeah.
Yeah, there are. I've noticed there are also very well known and successful B2B brands, but it's more B2C. The big companies that have been very very effective with branding, and I think I can learn from them.
Okay, that's like exactly what we're trying to do in this podcast today. We're trying to persuade B2B brands to start with branding as well. Okay. So, how do you think B2B businesses can leverage WordPress and the things that it has to offer?
So I don't know the stats, but I have a suspicion that it's mostly B2B companies that are using WordPress, and the smaller SMEs and startups, because obviously the cost of ownership, it's less expensive than a lot of competitive products. It's super flexible, right? So you can start with something and you don't have to commit to, you know, the what the future platform state is going to be, because you'll have the tools, the plugins, the whole ecosystem that can help you evolve your website or your functionality however you want. It's that flexible, and that's I think one of WordPress's main superpowers. Um, I'd like to see more B2C companies use WordPress, and I mean it's quite interesting because with WordPress, you can actually productize a version of WordPress and then reach out to industry segments, you know, shops or niches in publication, in e-commerce, everywhere, and offer a productized service and reach B2C and wherever. That's the flexibility of WordPress. The other thing to consider is I think WordPress is often better positioned than a lot of competitive platforms with AI. Again, because it's super flexible, um, it's open source, it's transparent, and we're seeing now everyone, in the ecosystem scrambling to build their AI, plugging their AI products. And recently, the project itself have announced that there is an AI team that are going to do some really really cool stuff within the core. And if you think of the competitors, if you think of even the big content management systems like Sitecore and Kenticore in enterprise, or even in Wix, in their decisions in terms of how the platform will evolves are really um, based on commercial imperatives, right? They have to go in the direction where it's going to make money, and if they're a public company, it's going to make their shareholders money. Whilst in WordPress, it's just like a complete mess. Everyone is doing 100 things at once, but you'll see a few solutions emerge and be adopted and be successful, and I think will accelerate way much faster than these other non-open source proprietary. Well, that's really exciting.
Okay. Moving on to branding. Why do you think branding is the next big thing for B2B marketers?
Yeah, and we talked about that a little bit earlier. As I mentioned, it is becoming noisy. Just look at your inbox. You know how much email you get and the channels. And now with AI, anyone. I mean, now you can actually like make a movie with Google VO3. It's incredible. Uh, and it's quality productions. The execution is fast, so everyone can do great stuff at scale. Mm. But I also think that we'll see a lot of fairly boring IKEA-like, content and creative, because I mean it's the same LLMs, I suppose, that are. It's going to look fairly standard, and that's a challenge, but perhaps it's an opportunity as well. You know,
Okay.
and
Really
it, oh, just to finish on that point again, brand plays a part because one test that I like to do and I like ask people to do is go to their inboxes, just look at all the emails they've got and just point out which are the ones they're going to open, and it's usually the brands that they like, right? And it might be one email out of 50 that you open because, oh, it's a brand that I like. I respect the people in the work doing. Click.
really interested in knowing that why do you think IKEA's branding is boring? I mean, a lot of people are really fan of IKEA's branding, no?
So big fun. In quite
Okay, I'm asking you why do you I would like to know why do you think that IKEA's branding is boring? Because a lot of people are huge fan of it. They think they do really well. So I would like to know your perspective.
I think I suppose boring is a little bit hard, but it's never bold or risky.
Yeah, it's never risky. That's true.
It's always safe. I think if you look at websites again in tech in the WordPress ecosystem, the standard SaaS look and feel is what every website looks like. And there are some examples of brands that have said, no, I'm not going to do that. Something different, and they stand out. So, and look, I think it's an opportunity if people do take those risks and are a little bit more creative.
Brings me to a question that do you think ditching a traditional B2B marketing methods is the way forward, or do you think old school techniques are becoming super less effective on people? Nobody wants to see a super slow ad, super boring social media anymore. Do you think that's changing the perspective of old school techniques in the world today?
I think the part of the problem now is that everything is moving so fast. Um, People's habits are changing because of social media, because of the channels. Um, I think we just generally have less time to like sit down and figure it out. But again, I go back to the fundamentals. I mean, those are tried and tested over time, both in brand and also in direct response. I mean, there are ways to do advertising much more effectively.
Yeah, I think due to this, the branding, due to our attention span is gotten so small that branding has taken a complete U-turn in the past previous few years. Even if their fundamentals remain the same, they were like people have curated them, moved them to more things that are in according to the generation today.
Yeah, and also the attention economy, right? It's becoming harder to grabs people's attention. They just have less time for you. So what do you do? I mean, it's I think it's a big problem for marketers. And I mean, what's also really interesting following what the big SEO tools are doing for their customers, like SEMrush, Keyshreds, and other ones. But they're introducing all these new tools, which are really all about brand, like brand mentions, because that's that's becoming important with AI, right?
Yeah, I
So
think uh, listening, one of the most biggest examples, everybody wants to know what people are saying about their brand.
so I think AI is actually kind of helping this shift towards more brand marketing, and it's for necessity for the reasons that I said earlier.
So how can B2B companies how can they step up their branding when the usual B2C strategies don't work for them?
Well, I think they should be inspired by B2C, right? And typically the difference is that in B2B you just spend more on direct response, right? Click here, try and solve this, or try and sign up somebody in this sales pipeline, and so on. So there's not so much of that longer term brand piece where you are basically trying to see the idea in people's mind about who you are and what you do. Okay. Now consider this. At any one point in time, there are about 1 to 5% of customers of your customer, your ICP in market to buy, right? So you're already like fishing in a pond where only a couple of fish are ready to bite. Now, 80% of that 1 to 5% will shortlist a familiar brand. Okay. So if they don't know you, then you should have to do the maths. I mean, if they don't know you, you talk about less than 1% us will actually buy from you. And that's where the gap is in B2B, particularly in B2B tech. That work that you've done, that investment in brand marketing, so that people actually do learn about you, not when they're ready to buy, but when they're reading something or when they see an advert. And that's, I think, what we need to do more of, actually.
Okay, so should WordPress startup owners should they focus on in-house marketing or brand building? So do you think outsourcing this aspect is the best option for them?
I think, in WordPress and in tech, the typical scenario for a startup that it's a developer that is done this amazing product and it works doing, but he or she is not a marketing expert. So they go out to market. Maybe they get the plugin listed in the WordPress plugin directory, and then nothing happens. So they need to wear that marketer hat on, right? Um, if they don't have a budget, then they need to basically learn how to do that. And one of the tactics, one of the strategies is, the founder marketer approach, where basically you go out there on podcasts, you write, blog posts, and there are some very successful companies that have started that way. There's do you know Atarin? They do a collaboration tool for agencies. It's like visual collaborations. You can like
Okay.
yeah. They they started actually as WP feedbacks specifically for WordPress. And the founder, Vito Pelle, he was all over the place for like a year and a half. He's all over the place. So obviously he grew to a point. He got his customers, got his team. He reached the milestones, and now, I mean, he's rarely seen in online. He's just too busy as the CEO uh, doing other things. But this idea of founder marketing is really critical for startups, particularly if you can invest in a marketing resource. That'd be great. It's probably more useful at the start to engage with somebody who is a more a strategist that understand the fundamentals, that can connect marketing with the commercial goals as well. Maybe the first stage is to create that framework, and then you can hand on to execution, and that's typically cheaper. And I don't think it really matters if it's outsourced or within the company itself. I mean, personally, I always prefer to do things in-house. It's just that in-house marketers live and breathe the product, the brand, support, uh, you know, nearly 24/7, depending on person that you are, Uh, whilst if you were working with an agency, you're a client, and some agency are just like there to bill hours.
Yeah, I would really like to agree with you over here. In-house marketers, I think the product becomes their second personality. They talk a
Very Yeah, you care about it, yeah, and you care about the customers, And again, I think one of the next stages now that with AI, everything is at scale, um, is engaging more with customers, is engaging more with the community, is engaging more with partners. That's something we're doing at WPBakery now. Actually, we had really focused on partners, and we are just going out there talking to everyone, meeting people at word camps. So we've committed to sponsoring word camps and just being present as well, and just having those human relationships. And we're not there with like certain commercial goals saying, okay, we gotta sign up X number of partners and have that amount of revenue. We're at the stage now where we just said, just go out there and talk to people.
That's great. So continuing what you said earlier, do you suggest B2B brands to start branding from day one, or is it something that they can do later at a certain point? After
I
that,
think,
at a certain yeah.
I mean, the way I see it is, it's usually more than the product. It's often a vision of how the product will benefit the customers and you know benefit even the wider society, right? And I think it's really beneficial if a lot of that, the vision is expressed earlier on than, you know, as part of a workshop 3 years later with the branding agency. The other critical thing that is positioning, right? You really need to nail the position in the market, the messaging, and again, it's all about making sure that people know what you're doing, and what are the benefits. So positioning, with the brand, really go hand in hand, and I think the sooner you do it, the better. But one of the big problems again with sort of technical founders is that they often don't go through that process, that exercise of understanding the market and actually even whether their product, you know, fits the market that they're trying to address. And if you don't have that, you don't have a business, right? So maybe that's the starting.
Because I noticed that a lot of B2B companies, they like to play it safe. So how do you think they can shift from being bold without losing their trust or professionalism and leverage new trends and recent memes to their benefit without coming off as too strong?
Yes. Um, I think it's. I think a lot of companies now have no choice because there's so much competition,
yeah.
and the competition is so noisy. So they have to do something. So what are they going to do? Are they going to do exactly the same thing that 3 or 4 or 5 other competitors have done before? And that's when they have to start being creative. Now, if that same company has invested in brand from day one, then that becomes easier, because if you are a known brand, people know you already, then obviously it's easier to grab attention. But then I think it's even easier to take risks without consequences and be creative. There's hosting company called Kinsta. So Kinsta in 2024, so last year, refreshed their brand, right? And their website basically went from your typical SaaS blue, boxes, um, UI design to a look and feel that reminds you like a 70s lounge, disco lounge, like orange and with flares, and it was such a bold statement by doing that. A lot of people talking, in the ecosystem, thinking, "Whoa, what did they do? They look so strange." A lot of people hated it. A lot of people loved it, but a lot of people were talking about it. So I think we'll see more of this, as things get harder. I suppose we also see um, some creative that will be a little bit desperate. People trying too hard to be creative and bold, maybe even aggressive. But it'll be certainly interesting.
Sure. And can you tell me some branding essentials for product companies and agencies in the modern WordPress ecosystem?
Um, so I've also freelanced and worked with plugin agencies and hosting companies. What I used to do actually is take a snapshot of the whole business model. And there is something called the business model canvas, which is a one pager where you define your channels, your market segments, your value propositions, your revenue streams, and all that kind of stuff on one page. It's a really, really easy exercise to do with a non-technical marketer. And you see straight away that these non-technical founders now really have a broader understanding of of what they're doing and the market, right? Because once you start talking about channels and once you're talking about segments, they kind of get that, okay, so yeah, I have to you know, reach that particular segment with this value proposition and so on. So that's like the real foundation. And then we talk about positioning because that's the superpower to actually be able to reach them with a consistent message, which makes sense in the right category, which is important for context and all that. And then brand also is overlaid on top of that because as I kind of mentioned earlier, it's I think it's important to start sooner rather than later. Um, and then you can start talking about all the tactics. How do you go to market? How do I run a campaign that will address this particular segment and address in these channels? And you can get creative there, experiment, fail, and so on. But again, the fundamentals are where you need to start.
Yeah, so how can the marketers find a good balance between quick wins like leads and clicks, and also build a brand that can, give real time results and faster results?
Yeah, um, it's quite hard to figure out what the balance is.
Okay.
Um, if you're a big brand in B2C, fast consumer goods, the formula is typically, 50, 60, 70 brand marketing, and the rest is direct response. That has worked for decades. In B2B, in B2B tech, um, those percentages are different. It also depends where you are at in your what stage your business is at, whether it's a startup or an established brand and so on, and also on other factors. What I say is that invest in brand. Whatever you do, have that consistent piece going, which is purely brand uh, at all time. Right? And then you do all your direct response pieces, your like Friday sales, your and so on. You just have to continuously invest in brand.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right.
Since we're already past half of 2025 and most companies are already done with their Q3 planning, uh, we have seen a lot of trends change. We have seen people move from minimalism to a high end, very fun, edgy marketing techniques this year. Yes, a lot of people move to completely old school marketing as well. They've gone back to the 90s, they bring colors in their channels. So what marketing, what branding techniques do you think are going to stick next year as well? Or what new things are we expected to, should expect to see in Trade 6?
So that's a difficult question because I mean I'm in Australia, so we're in Q1, for example. So mind you, WPBakery is based in Europe. So professionally, I'm in Q3, and we've we've worked half the year, we've done a lot of foundational work, and so we're actually executing more now. There are so many different variables, I think, to consider for that. I think what's really interesting is, and what people need to take into considerations are the macro stuff. The what is the economy doing globally, and it's like a complete mess, right? Even the politics, even and obviously the technology. So I would be now again, like I think everyone else, worried about or interested in or a bit of everything with AI. And because I like to plan typically 12 months in advance and I have that 12-month view, you know, I'm asking myself, how is AI going to work for marketers in, you know, 12 months time? Are we all going to be making Hollywood quality movies at the click of a button, distributing everything at scale? You know, if that's the scenario, then what can we do to again, uh, be noticed in so much ways? The other thing that we're doing, as I mentioned earlier, at WPBakery is talking to people more, going to WordCamps more, like going out more. And I think relationship building and partnerships is a good strategy now, as things get really noisy and even to a certain degree predictable and a little bit boring. I'll use that word again. In the digital space.
Okay. So apart from Kinsta, what other brands come to your mind when you think of sudden recent branding changes?
Um, well, another interesting one is commerce. So they announced their new name, and it was a really well executed brand refresh. Um, the logo didn't change that much. It's still recognizable. Why lose all the sort of equity uh, and brand recall accumulated over the years? So that made sense. But what they were addressing primarily is the architecture side of things, because they want to do more than just WooCommerce. They have other products that are Woo this and Woo that, right? So it doesn't make sense for their main brand name to be WooCommerce when under that really you have a whole stable of that was good. And look, they've posted blogs about it that are super interesting. They did that internally, which is really cool. Kinsta, I think they engaged with an external agency for that. LRWP, that was another interesting one. They I think rebranded a few years as well. Again, um, I think they primarily grew through acquisition, so they had this stable of plugins and products, little different names and different visual identities, and they kind of brought it all together under the standard W brand.
Okay. Do you have any branding advice, like to end it? Can you give a good branding advice to everybody who's listening?
I like to talk about Patagonia as a brand, because it's very purpose driven, right? Patagonia, they're an outwear mountaineering type brand, and they're really true to themselves and the visions and what they represent, right? So, for example, um, they believe in sustainability so much that they had a campaign once that basically said, don't buy too much of our products. Your jacket should last you a long time. And then they had like initiatives, and still now you can actually go to a Patagonia shop, like your jacket gets fixed for free. They are really neglect them for that. Um, I like to look outside, technology often, to see how brands are doing outside the space that I uh, inhabit every day, 24/7. Uh, Another one worth mentioning, I think it's Red Bull, the energy drink, which has I'm not even sure people know that it's a energy drink anymore. They have just become this huge media company producing incredible content, all associated to extreme sports, which kind of makes sense because you know Red Bull gives you wings, right? So you can fly. that. So that's super interesting, and we could have probably a whole podcast about the content marketing aspect of that. Um, let's talk briefly about one last one. I'm not sure whether this is like a success story though. There was a WordPress hosting company called Wild Cloud. They had an interesting product. They basically allowed you to productize WordPress and have one instance of WordPress be replicated, like a bit like WordPress multi-site, but with a different solution on hosted on containers and all that. And they were really, really, really bold with their with the website, completely different from what you saw before. But I actually went to their website a couple of months ago. It's not there anymore, so obviously something happened as well. But at least it was somebody brave enough to try something different from a brand perspective.
And that's it for today. Thank you, Lawrence, for joining us. It was a very insightful conversation. We loved it. And if you the guys like this chat, hit follow, and there are more fresh takes coming your way soon. So catch you in the next one. Thank you so much, Lawrence. Bye.
I get you.